Well, good afternoon, everyone. I know that we have some people who are going to be coming in from classes, but rather than wait, I thought we'd get started and we'll let them filter in as they do. My name is Stephen Roper. I'm the Executive Director of the Peace, Justice, and Human Rights Initiative at Florida Atlantic. And I'm very pleased to welcome you to our first event of the fall semester, an event that commemorates the United Nations International Day of Peace. And it's fitting that, that today we really deal with an issue that has been receiving, frankly, a lot of attention over the last 6 months, and particularly even this last week. When the International Day of Peace was created in 1981, it was to commemorate a day of peace to end combat hostilities and to provide humanitarian aid for those individuals who are in conflict zones. And if you reflect on what has even just transpired in the last 2 days, where we've had humanitarian aid convoys in Syria actually being targeted and destroyed. Today it was reported that at least 6 aid workers were actually killed in Syria providing humanitarian aid. It's meaningful that we reflect upon the fact that the conflicts that were supposed to be commemorated and to end back in 1981 are alive today. And what I wanted to do as we were kind of conceptualizing how to commemorate and to think of peace was to think of the issue of immigration. We've been focusing a lot of our attention on the issue of combat, the issue of the war, and all too often the individuals that are involved, the victims of the war, are forgotten. And many of those individuals either are displaced within their own country or are trying to flee from the conflict. The estimates are today that there are approximately 65 million people who have been displaced, either due to conflict or due to persecution. And on a daily basis, what that works out to being is that on every day, 34,000 people are fleeing their homes, either internally displaced in their own country or having to flee to border countries. And some of the countries that are the most likely to accept many of these refugees include the countries, of course, that are least likely to be able to facilitate for them, Lebanon, for example, or Turkey. So as we commemorate UN's International Day of Peace, I thought it was a good opportunity for us also to take stock about U.S. immigration policy, and for us to reflect about how do we treat people who are fleeing conflict, how do we treat people who are fleeing persecution. So Jose's drawings, when I first saw them, and again, as everyone knows, these were done during his detention in the Chrome facility, were incredibly powerful in giving voice to the voiceless, because again, we tend to talk about these numbers, 65 million people or 34,000 people on a daily basis, but we oftentimes don't see the faces of those individuals. We just see the numbers. We see the destruction, but we don't see the humanity in the people who are actually being touched. And so when I saw Jose's drawings, I immediately knew that this was something that would be a wonderful representation of the possibility of peace and the possibility of redemption. Vicky's presentation that we'll begin with is going to try to provide a little bit of a larger context on the role of immigration and the plight of those individuals who are refugees, who are fleeing from conflict and persecution. It's hard on a day to celebrate peace, international peace, when we've had so much destruction and so many people who've been traumatized, to think in a positive way. However, as I was kind of preparing my notes, I was reflecting upon an email I'd received from Vicki, in which yesterday she welcomed a family from Syria who had just gotten here, and as you can imagine, were overjoyed to be in the United States and the possibility of starting a new life. And I was also reflecting about Jose's work, and when I would walk into the Boca Museum of Art, one of the first things I would see is this massive acrylic mural that he had done with these really vibrant colors, I think, that were done after the detention, and kind of the realization of the humanity and the importance of life and self-affirming life that can come sometimes out of tragedy. And maybe, as they always say, the best art comes out of tragedy. And so I'd like, as we begin this discussion, we reflect upon the kind of sometimes very dark side of the immigration problem globally, to think that there are positive stories, and that we, in some small way, by talking about issues, can contribute to solutions. We're delighted today to have as our co-sponsor and our partner the Boca Museum of Art, which will be holding actually the opening exhibit of Jose's work tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. And students with an ID are free for admission, and so I would encourage students to take an opportunity to go to the museum, even though I understand that right now, in talking with some of the members of the museum, that they've had actually a lot of people RSVPing, but I think it's a wonderful opportunity for students to engage the museum as well. So the format is that Vicki is going to begin our talk today by, again, kind of contextualizing a little bit about the sort of stories that Jose is going to be relating. What I'd like to do is hold off on questions and answers until after Jose's, so if you have any questions specifically for Vicki, please just hold on until after Vicki's presentation. So let me first introduce Vicki Rosenthal. And so while Vicki was obtaining her master's in social work at Florida Atlantic University, I'm proud to say that she actually also received a certificate in peace studies. One of our first persons to do so received a minor in French and advanced her global understanding through interdisciplinary studies in international political science and sociology. In her professional career, she's worked with international non-governmental organizations, intergovernmental organizations, and governments, including governments in Europe, the United States, and a country I know that she cares deeply about, Haiti. She is a FAU Peace and Justice Human Rights faculty fellow and adjunct professor in the School of Social Work, and uses the experiences that she's gained to teach global citizenship to our students, responsibility and human rights advocacy, both from a local as well as from a global perspective, focusing on issues of refugees, immigrants, human trafficking, environment, poverty, gender, and children. She developed a research and inquiry component for undergraduate students combined with service learning, where students work with a local refugee resettlement provider. Please come on in. While developing an intellectual or creative contribution to the discipline of study. She's worked with a number of different organizations, a number of different areas, health and mental health, the Haitian disaster recovery, Islamic radicalization in France, and women's-run organizations and society. Her volunteerism includes chairing the Human Relations Committee of Broward County Public Schools, providing social services to refugees and to immigrants through Church World Service, and advocating for the health and mental health legislation for survivors of human trafficking as advocacy committee co-chair of HEAL and Trafficking Incorporated. So without further ado, let me introduce our first presenter, and that will be Vicki Rosenthal. Vicki.
Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to be a part of this event, as well as to be presenting and honoring International Peace Day. And International Peace Day is supposed to stop combat so humanitarian aid can get to people. And to see that reaction in today's news of humanitarian aid workers being killed is just a slap in the face towards this day. Because in past days, in past years on this day, Taliban have put their weapons down. Humanitarian aid has gone in and been able to treat children for polio and other diseases that they hadn't been able to reach. So International Peace Day is also for us. In the climate of violence and reference to media being completely negative and aggressive towards populations and people of different ethnicities and religions, it gives us an opportunity and a platform to be able to discuss, especially on this day. Let's take the time, come to an event, and hear and think about peace and what we can do on Peace Day and the day after and the day after. So in reference to current events, our political climate, we have a lot of negativity in the media. The culture of our leaders is allowing and creating an opportunity for people to justify negative speech and violence towards people. They've opened those doors. And for us, on the other side of the media and the other side of the speaker being able to hear these people speak, a lot of times we can even cast our own personal opinions and judgments towards people we don't even know and hear only one side of the story, which there is a danger in only knowing and casting thoughts and developing a whole way of looking at a group of people just by knowing one side. And Jose's renderings create a platform to be able to look at another side of the story. Because as we look at them, we can say, well, who are these people? Why are they here? Why did they come here? And then why did they get caught and stuck in the Chrome Center, detained, waiting for judgment on whether or not they're going to be sent back to their country of origin? So as we hear stories on the radio, as we're listening, or on TV, or read it on social media about these horrific, horrible things that immigrants, illegal or not, Muslims, are doing to our country, perhaps we can step back and say, okay, but there is more to the story. Why? Who are these people? And what brought them here? Because no one leaves, if all the basic needs are met, and all they have financially are secure and able to pay for their children to go to school, and everything is peaceful, they're not going to say, oh yes, I want to leave Honduras. I want to cross the desert and over the mountains and possibly get killed and my children get raped and get caught by gangs, and let's try to do this to get to the United States to, fear about getting caught and be sent back. No one, if their needs are met, no one's going to be doing that, right? So what is the push-pull factor of people being pushed out of their country and then pulled into a place where they feel that there's going to be safety? So, and a lot of times you hear stories as if the Americans had no responsibility in it. It's just these people that are here wanting to take our jobs. And whether we know what system or what was wrong with the system or what factors that brought someone here, at least we can say, this could be the reason. And just within the United States, under NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, presently 2 million farmers have lost their jobs because of government subsidies on corn that have exported from our country into theirs, where the most important agricultural product in Mexico is corn. 2 million farmers can't survive selling corn, their own crop that they've always been able to have as their livelihood. Another example, foreign workers are recruited and transported from American corporations, brought here to work, such as Signal International, treated abusively in reference to forced to work here, passports being taken, fear of deportation, fear of their families being killed. And it happened to be one of the largest labor trafficking settlements in the U.S., 20 million. These particular individuals were from India. As living in Florida, we pass agricultural farms all the time. The we seek workers out there. Tomato fields, strawberry fields, orange pickers. Many of them are undocumented. Many of them are under a guest worker permit, a law in the United States to allow companies to bring in people, bring in persons from all different countries in order to work for cheap labor. It has to be minimum wage at least. But the housing that they provide, mattresses on the floor, stoves don't work, refrigerators don't cool. So the minimum that is given to them in order to work are those types of conditions. So these are conditions, these are examples of the other side of the story. One of the guest workers work and then they send their money back to Venezuela for their children to go to school. Because they can make more at $10 an hour here than they can in Venezuela. So they have the transportation here, they work, they can try to get as much work as they possibly can, and then they go back home. So the reasons for these examples is to allow us as conscious individuals to not just accept negative and be a part of the force of this negative movement that we have, this negative culture that we have, and it seems like it's people are thriving upon it. And not only maybe we disdain it and we don't agree with it, and we don't know exactly how to combat it, we can always just change conversation, or at least say, well, is that really, do you really know them? Do you really know where they came from? Do you really know why they're here? There is a reason. And the reasons are just for survival. The reasons are just for humanity. So I feel that we, as human beings, have a responsibility to try to make every day a peace day. Because we, as human beings, and I heard someone say this just recently, is that human beings agree with empathy, with love, with peace. We don't, violence, war, abuse, maltreatment don't agree with us. If it did, we wouldn't have trauma, PTSD, and all the other ill effects that come from aggression. Physical, mental. And I feel, and this is what I tell my students, once we understand that it is beyond, once we understand that it's systems, it's problems with the system, whether it's within our family, whether it's in our neighborhood, whether it's local, go on like that, we have the opportunity and we have the responsibility to change the world. And our world is as big as the people we come in contact with, whether it's changing conversation, whether it's acknowledging peace day, whether it's saying, you know what, I don't feel that way. You never know. I would say one thing, or you're kind to someone, that we become aware of our own negative biases. We're all human. We all have it. And if someone's, it affects me negatively, that I can say, you know what? Why do I feel that way? They're human. At least treat them as my equal. We never know the ripple effect of that. That's unending. So it is my pleasure to be a part of this event, to meet all of you, and to honor Peace Day together with you. Thank you.
I appreciate the fact that, that again, Vicki ends on a positive note, because for all of us, I think the takeaway in coming together today is to reflect on the tragedy that many people have, but how we can move forward to assist people. And I think that that's the story that Jose will be telling with his drawings today, is the story of tragedy that people have suffered and the humanity and dignity that those people have as well. So let me introduce Jose. Jose Alvarez, also known as Dopa, was born in Venezuela in 1961. He currently lives and works here in South Florida. He began his career by making a name for himself through charismatic performances, where he channeled the 2,000-year-old spirit of a shaman named Carlos in front of live audiences and through media broadcasts that have been viewed by literally millions of people, and I know there's a number of fans in this room today, actually. These performances were the subject of video work and presented in the 2002 Whitney Biennial and at a solo exhibit at the Kitchen in New York. Alvarez was detained in the Chrome Detention Center in Miami for alleged immigration violations for 2 months in 2012. And during this time, he created a series of portraits of his fellow detainees using very rudimentary things that you could find, ballpoint pens and whatever paper. And then these portraits not only, I think, capture the physical essence of the subjects, but also their powerful stories. So without further ado, let me turn the floor over to Jose.
I'm very happy to be here, and I thank you all for coming to this event. And first, I would like to thank the Peace, Justice, and Human Rights Initiative, to FAU, Stephen Roper, and especially Vicky Rosenthal, who's been absolutely wonderful in the process of putting this thing together. And to Irvin Littman, the director of the Boca Raton Museum, for giving me the opportunity, and to the whole staff of the museum, who has been so wonderful and caring and in the treatment of the project. In 2012, I was taken by Immigration Services to the Chrome Detention Center in Miami, alleging immigration violations of the immigration law. These violations arose from a conviction that I had for essentially identity theft. I came to this country in the early 80s to study art at the Fort Lauderdale Art Institute. My visa was running out, and I was terrified to go back to Venezuela, a country that is very hostile and violent against gay people. I have no way to stay in the country, and at that time I was offered false papers in order to stay, and it was a pretty difficult decision for me to make, since up to that point I have never done anything illegal. But I saw no choice, so I did took those papers. I thought of it as a temporary solution, but it is snowball. And 30 years later, I had the federal agents come into our home and take me to Chrome. Now, when I went to Chrome, I stayed there in a very depressed mode. I kept sleeping for days on end. And I think it was about the 5th day that one of the detainees there is a line of bunk beds in this long corridor in this building. And there are, these 2 beds, one on top of the other. And one of the guys there came over and started poking at me and said, "Get up, get up. You can't do this. You can't let depression take over. You must, fight this thing." And I was like, but what's up with this guy? Like, what do you care what I do or what I don't do, right? I would just like go away, leave me alone. And he asked me, what do you do? And I say, I'm an artist. And he said, well, so why aren't you drawing? And I was like, totally annoyed at the guy. So he ran to his bed and brought a piece of paper and a little pen. And the pens that they use are the fillers of imagine a Vic writing pen, but without the hard shell, just the inner part of it, which is flexible. And they are about 5 inches, more or less. So he brought that, and he said, why don't you draw me? And I was like, okay, let's draw this guy so he can go away and I can go back to sleep. So I started drawing him, and this is Julio. And as you can see, the drawing was done really fast. I wasn't really caring about what I was doing. I just wanted for him to go away. And he was Brazilian. So I'm talking to him while I'm doing this thing, and then somebody else come, and he said, I want to be drawn as well. And he was also Brazilian. His name was Felipe. And this is Felipe. Felipe was a gay guy that came to the United States with his family. And he like is so common in Latin American countries, he was also attacked and bullied in Brazil for being gay. And the same thing was happening here. Even though he was one of the most popular guys at the end, I realized, because of his joyful nature. But also he needed to watch himself because there is like 100 guys in this environment, and it's pretty homophobic environment. So he had a lot of circumstances that were quite unpleasant for him. And as I'm drawing all of them, they are telling me their story. I'm asking, why are you here? Why did you come here, etc. And they're telling me all these stories that were quite heartbreaking and quite horrific at the same time of escaping persecution or poverty or political unrest, or simply being killed by the gangs in Central America. And the more they were telling me of all their journey and all the things that they mustered to come here, and the decision not only for them to come here, but with family at hand, with their little kids, with their husband, wife, or even grandparents, I was just really moved by this really human tragedy. So I was saying, but people do need to know these things. People do need to know these stories. And they were like, but who is going to document this? Like, who cares? Nobody cares. We're here. We're trapped in this building. We're going to be deported. Nobody cares. And then as I was drawing, then I said, but I can draw. And I can ask you your story. And this is how the genesis of the Chrome project started. About me trying to document for somebody else what was happening and about them. The more I drew, at first, they were quite, there were a few that wanted to be drawn, but there were some other ones that were quite suspicious. And I figured that it's because drawing is a very intimate situation where you are, for quite a long time looking at someone, etc. And they don't want to be looked at that way in that space. So I would put the drawings on the floor, and I would let them watch what I was doing, and I would tell them that eventually I will be showing these drawings and I will be talking about them. The more drawings I was doing, every day I would get up and then put them on the floor. They would come, look, ask questions, but always being kind of not sure whether they would want to pose for me or not. And eventually, as I drew more and more, at the end, they were all like, I want to be drawn next, and I want to be drawn next. And this guy is called, his name was Tinky Winky. They call him Tinky Winky. The reason that he is just an outline is because he was deported before I was able to finish the drawing. I couldn't get any of the information from him, but the thing that I knew was that he was brought here when he was a baby from El Salvador. And he considered himself an American, and I think of him as an American. I mean, his whole life is here. And yet, he for some reason, he didn't resolve his papers. He was taken. And he was like, I don't know anybody in freaking Salvador. I am an American. He kept on telling, I am an American. But he was deported. And this is Salvador. Salvador was in the bed right next to me. And when he saw me drawing, he started getting into the idea of drawing himself. And we were given white shorts as underwear. And he will take these shorts and will gather the postcard that the kids will send to the people in there and trace Bugs Bunny or any of the cartoon figures that these cards will have. And he will start drawing like those bubble text things like in the comics. And he will start saying, listen, I'm here in Chrome. Don't you see that I'm suffering? And then another character will say something else. And his whole psyche will be drawn into all of these cartoon characters all around the underwear. And then he would take another one, and then he would have all of these drawings with him. And I actually asked him if I could have one of them, and he gave me one. I don't pretend that this project is about my experience in there. I think this project is about our experience in there, because we were all part of each other's experience. We were all in a very intense situation where we needed somehow to help one another, I guess, and talk and tell who we were. I think is the anonymity is what it was so scaring, not scaring, but like a scarring in terms of what it does to your persona, living with this situation of always hiding, of knowing that you don't have the same kind of rights than the rest of the population. And I mean, again, I don't pretend to know all the answers for this, but I think that through this particular project, I felt that I was not only saving myself, but they were saving themselves somehow. It was giving them importance. And there is an actual, this is Ricardo. Ricardo told me the story of going through the desert and seeing several blue, stiff bodies in the brush, in the desert, dead. And he said, you see kids' clothing everywhere, backpacks, you name it. He says, it's everywhere. And again, I just, as Vicky said, people who come here with family at hand, going through a desert, avoiding snake bites, or maybe dying from hunger, maybe dying from thirst, or being raped by the coyotes, or maybe the zetas, which is this kind of gang in Central America. They don't have in their mind to come here and do harm. They just want to have an opportunity either to not only to escape what they were living in their country, but also for self-emancipation and just have the opportunity for a better life. This is Roberto from Guatemala. Roberto is quite an extraordinary person, I thought. This is a guy who spoke 7 languages, 2 of them English, Spanish, the rest were dialects, but he didn't know how to read or write. And yet, not knowing how to read or write, he put his kids through medical school, through the money that he was making here as a master crane operator. I was talking with him, and he told me that when he was about 7 years old, he was getting all kinds of abuse by his grandparents. So he left to another farms in villages around there. And he said that he would visit soccer fields and wait until the games were over, so he could go and search if there were any deflated balls. So he could cut them in half, and each half would become his shoes. And I was like, whoa. That level of poverty, it was pretty amazing that all the story he was telling. Then he said that he enrolled in the army when he was 15 simply because he wanted to have something. He didn't have anything. And I remember the first time I was interviewing him, he said, or he went on for about half an hour about the crease in the pants that they gave him, because he never had that. And he kept on talking about the crease in the shirt and the crease in the pants. And he said, and he was very proud of how look he could in shirts and pants. I mean, the stories are long. I couldn't put all of them, but it was pretty amazing to me, all of the stories that they were telling me. And then this is Brahima. Brahima comes from the Ivory Coast. Brahima slept 2 months straight while I was there. He would just go to the cafeteria, eat, go back, and sleep for 2 months. So one day I asked him, I said, you know the project that I'm doing, and I would love to interview you and to draw you. Will that be okay? He said, yeah. So he sat, and I started drawing. And as I'm drawing, he started crying. And I was like, totally confused. Why is he crying? So I touched his knee, and I said, why are you crying? It's going to be okay. And he was, keep drawing, man, keep drawing. And I said, keep drawing, man. So I kept drawing. then the following day I saw him again, and I said, you know, I'm doing this. I need to do some more retouching. And he said, okay, but first, he went to his bunk, came back with a piece of paper, and he said, could you do one for my daughter? And I said, of course. So he sat, and I said, I really need to ask you, why were you crying yesterday? And he said, I never been drawn. And I think what he meant, I mean, granted, none of these people have ever been drawn. But I think what he meant to say was, you are acknowledging me. You're looking at me. Not as Brahima 330, but, well, not even Brahima, they wouldn't even use your name. They would say, Ivory Coast 330. They wouldn't call you by your name, but by the country, and then a number that Crumbs gives you. That was a very powerful moment for me. Personal, in terms of, my God, all the layers of things that we do. But as an art moment of what art can do. And this for me was like the perfect expression of art as humanizer, in that he became that for me and I for him. And for me and for all of us, I guess this project was like art as savior. Because without it, I don't think I would have made it there. I felt that I was on a mission to document their lives and somehow, somewhere, show them and tell the people who they were and why they came here and what their names were. Not 383, not 2 or 3, but Brahima or Julio or Felipe. Now, there is all of these drawings have a number, have a color underneath, blue or orange. What that means is that when you get into Chrome, depending on whether you have, done any kind of criminal act, depending on the level or no level at all, or simply that they caught you because you were without a driver license, low risk or no risk, or it's blue. Then if you have getting into an altercation with somebody or whatever is orange, and red is for very bad things. Now, I do not claim that in all the millions of undocumented immigrants, nobody's at fault. Of course not. What I'm posing here is a question in a more fundamental way about how we treat one another, how societies treat one another, because this is something that is not only happening in the United States, but it's also happening in the European Union, it's happening in Australia, everywhere. And undocumented immigrants are not only socially stigmatized, but they are forced by law to hide and to be invisible. Invisibility creates a whole set of circumstances within your own psychology and emotional state, where every day you have to deal with all these forces coming at you. And then if you don't have a driver license, but you need to feed your family, you will have to take that truck and drive. And then we have all of these families torn apart. We have gay, binational couples torn apart. When I came to the United States to to be gay was considered a pathology. And in Venezuela, you can imagine the kind of situation that I was living there. Things got better, and we have equality now, and yet still I know that the process still continues. And we all have to fight with for these fundamental human rights. I just wanted to bring these drawings in a way, not only that you meet them and know them, and you cannot forget again who they are. Now you know who they are. But also to bring another element in the conversation that is so riddled with hate and ignorance. I have a whole bunch of notes here that I am not using because, I read a quote by Mandela, which I thought it was pretty appropriate, that he said, "Poverty is not an accident. Like slavery and apartheid, it is man-made and can be removed by the actions of human beings." A lot of these situations are caused by this, as you mentioned before, by these imbalances in the economy, among other things, obviously. But I just saw another documentary called CERN, which is about the collider in Europe. And there is a scientist there that talks about the fact that there are about 180 nations, scientists there, working together in investigating how the universe came into existence, and all of these really major questions. And he was very proud that all of these nations were there working together for a common good. And yet we have other spaces where division is fostered and advanced for simply personal gain, personal advantage. I have another quote by the Dalai Lama. "Once we have a firm practice of compassion, our state of mind becomes stronger, what leads to inner peace, which leads to inner peace, giving rise to self-confidence, which reduces fear. This makes for constructing members of the community. Self-centeredness, on the other hand, leads to distance, suspicion, mistrust, and loneliness, with unhappiness as a result. And I will say, with very dire consequences." So, thank you for listening. I will invite you to come to the Boca Raton Museum. All of the drawings are there. All of the testimonials and the narrative are there. Two days ago, I was the installation of the drawings. And then all the people left, and I was left alone in the room. it was very emotional for me to see them all up, and that I made good by them, and that I also was able to somehow bring an element in the conversation that is not what we hear, but their stories, and that people now know who they are, that they were not just deported and nobody knew. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Jose. I know that this is very emotional for him, and it's, I think, emotional for all of us to hear what you have to say and to see the images of those. And I appreciate you sharing that with us. And I know that many of us will want to see the other stories that you have to tell and the other subjects as well. So I thought I would open up the floor. We just have a few minutes left, but for any questions you would have either for Jose or for Vicky before we conclude.
Have you followed up on some of the stories?
I don't know where they are. I have some contact info which I felt that I wanted to bring the drawings to them eventually, and try to make, at least to get them to them. Whether it's gonna be online or a book or whatever, but I want to tell them that this happened. Mhm.
This was a huge part of your life.
Yes.
And when you left there, what did you do? What did you take forward, and where are you at now in your art?
Well, I'm gonna tell you a crazy story. I was drawing one of the guys, actually the priest, or the person who acted as the priest there. They would all make these huge circles and hold themselves and prayed and prayed and prayed. And this is just a side note from what your question is, but I just remember that the image that keeps sticking in my mind from Chrome is all these guys kneeling in front of the corner of the buildings, either like this or like this, but they would all kneel in the corner. I don't know why that was, but I know that in Spanish we call it plegaria. I guess in English it's pray. But they didn't have anything there. They didn't have a connection with their family. The cost of the phone calls, most of them couldn't afford. And that's another element in this whole situation, is the for-profit situation that happened with all of these detention centers, which is something that I'm not gonna touch, but it affects all of them. So they were in this corner always praying, because that's all they got. That's all they got. And they were just like, please. For Tinky Winky, he would call his little girl every night. He would sing like lullabies to her, and then he would get into bed and cry until he was deported. And on and on and on. Now, I called my husband when they told me that I was going to be released, and I got all frantic and very. I just couldn't even pack because I was shaking. But the only thing I care about were my drawings. I said, that's the only thing I want to take from this place. So they all came over and they hugged me and they said, don't forget about the project. I said, I won't forget about the project. And then I called my husband and I said, I will be released today. And he said, well, I'm going to go there now. And I said, no, don't come now, because they said it takes about 12 hours to be processed. No, I'm going now. Okay, then I go out, it's in the middle of the summer. And hours go by, and all the situation that you have to go through in order to get out of there. Then around midnight, I go to the little guard house, the one that have all those, the things that allow the cars to go in and out. And there is this little street light, and everything is dark. And this tiny figure is underneath with his cane. And the guard said, that gentleman there has been waiting since 2 o'clock in there. I said, I know. So he came over and he said, let's go home. So we went to a diner in Fort Lauderdale. And I just couldn't, just the wind, it was just like a out-of-body experience, I guess. And I opened the menu, and there were like 200 things to choose from. And I just started laughing hysterically about the meaning of being able to choose, because none of us could, But here was just like hundreds of items, and just the disparity of things was pretty amazing. So I came out of that place and I went home and I started painting. And I created this large painting that I call The Promised Land. And it's also at the museum. And I kept doing my life as an artist. I'm a contemporary artist, and that's what I do. And I have kept doing that. But this particular project is very different from the rest of my artwork, which is very exuberant and very colorful and very joyful, I guess. But I think it's also one of the ways that I try to bring us together into a commonality, not to talk about destruction and apocalyptic themes, but rather to something that unite us. And that's why I want my work always to have that that element in it that you recognize within that which I want to talk about. I don't know if I have another one here. Oh yeah, and these are what I call my ghost drawings. These are people who I never got any information from. I don't know the country, their names or anything. They were deported before I could get any of that information. And they are also part of the exhibition. Any other question? Or for me or Vicky? Yes.
What did the authorities and the detention center think about your project? Did you have to hide it?
Well, no, I was always showing them on the floor, always. So they would walk around, and sometimes some of them would say, oh, you could do you can make some money in a mall or something, drawing people. And then afterward, they started bringing their own pictures for me to draw of girlfriends or whatever. And I would always say, just wait, I just have a few more people to draw and I'll get back to you. Because for me, it was about the people within the building, not about them. So that I wasn't gonna draw the people who were incarcerating us. Yes?
Do you have any advice for families who are moving here, or families who have people alongside them?
Wow. I personally, I don't know. Advise coming here. I don't know what to tell you really. It's so charged in so many ways. I wouldn't feel comfortable giving advice to anybody about that situation. This is what I live, and this is what I am able to talk to people, and I would love to talk to anybody. But giving advice, I don't see myself capable or equipped to do that. No. Oh. Yes.
How many drawings did you do?
30. Mhm.
Is that including the unknowns?
I'm sorry?
Is that including the unknowns?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this very powerful message. Thank you, Vicki. I was curious about the testimony part of it. Were you writing as they talked to you? Or
At first, when I started drawing it, I would just draw them. But then a lot of them were deported while I was drawing them. And then I was left with this drawing but no name. So then I changed my tactic and I said, I have to ask them first in case they're taken. Then at least I have something of who they were. So then I changed and I would ask the questions and wrote them down, and then I would draw them. Mhm. Yes.
Were you able to make any connections with the people, with their family members here, Tinky Winky, any of the people?
Unfortunately not. Actually, I have called 3 of them in the numbers that they left me, and they're all disconnected or belong to somebody else. So, no, unfortunately.
Do you have any plans to make further drawings of people who are immigrants here?
I don't know. Right now, I'm just very, very happy that it's here. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I'm very thankful. Very thankful.
Well, I'm mindful of the time, and I know that there were some people who wanted to maybe speak to Jose afterwards, and so I'm sure he'll be around for a couple of minutes for anyone who would want to speak to.
Sure.
But I would like for everyone to join me in thanking Vicki, thanking Jose, and again, I think even though there's a lot of tragedy, there's an incredible humanity that's shown in the drawings. I hope that, again, we take away the positive power of humanity, both in terms of the preservation of life and not focus so much on the destruction of life as we have been doing over the last few days. So thank you so much again, Jose, for coming today.
Thank you.